folks. We've still got a few people logging in, but let's get started. Thanks once again to everybody for joining us for this webinar specifically on upgrading to the latest version of VMware vSphere. I should be clear on this. I was really hoping to be able to demonstrate some vSphere 7 stuff, but unfortunately I got a hard no from VMware Legal. So I'll be talking a lot about some of the technologies that are in vSphere 7, but the screenshots, the videos that you're going to see, I've had to make them using generally available code. So apologies for that, but hopefully, we're still going to learn a lot during this process. So for those of you who don't know me and looking at the attendees list, there's a number of names on there that I definitely recognize. But for those of you who don't know me, this ugly mug is me. I'm Kev Johnson. I'm a systems engineer at Runecast. I've been with Runecast now for about 6 weeks. Prior to that, I was the technical marketing architect for vSphere at VMware. So I've done a fair amount of stuff with vSphere. A lot of you might have seen me at the vSphere roadshows, talking about vSphere upgrade. So I've got some chops in that kind of area. Outside of work, as it says there, I'm a big fan of hiking. Not allowed to do so much of that right now, but thanks coronavirus. I'm also a fan of Scottish football, so Celtic are my team. I'm not Scottish. I know the accent doesn't give it away. But I'm also a big fan of travel. Again, not so much of that going on, and cheese. So I'm having to give that up because the doctor says I eat too much cheese. And yeah, the running side of things, I do like to pretend that I like to run. You can see me, you can find my content at my blog, v-it.pro. I podcast with a bunch of other folks in the UK at opentechcast.com. Probably the biggest place that you'll find me is on Twitter at Kev_Johnson. If you've got any questions following up from this and you don't manage to get them asked during the webinar, please feel free to reach out to me on Twitter. It's far easier to get hold of me there than if I were to give you my email address, because I check Twitter way more often than I check my email. So thanks for that. Let's have a quick look at the stuff we're going to cover then. So in terms of agenda, we have, what's going on there? We're going to talk about why you might want to upgrade vSphere. And there's probably two main reasons for that. One is that you might be stuck on vSphere 6, which went end of general support a couple of weeks ago. So, if you're still running vSphere 6, then in the interest of supportability, you're going to need to be upgrading. The other one, obviously, as of, I think it was March the 10th, there was the big announcement of vSphere 7. So we're going to talk a little bit about what's coming in vSphere 7 in the coming slides. We're going to talk about why planning is important. And I know planning isn't sexy. It's it's one of those things. Nobody likes writing documentation or making plans. People just want to jump in and do it. So I'm going to talk a little bit about why the planning aspect is super important. We're going to talk about finding out if your hardware is going to be supported for the next version of vSphere, because a lot of people they're sweating their assets. They've got servers that are 4 or 5 years old. They're going to want to be able to establish whether their hardware is supported and what they can do if the hardware isn't supported for the latest and greatest versions. We're going to talk about health checks and the importance of knowing the state of your environment before you even begin an upgrade. So I'm not going to talk too much about that right now, but we'll get there shortly. We'll talk about the importance of interoperability. So this is both the VMware interoperability side of things and also the third-party products as well. We're going to talk about the upgrade process. And that's probably going to be the meat of this. There's a lot of stuff to get through for that. And then we're going to talk about convergence specifically. So I was going to put in a section all about day 2 operations. The problem is I've only got an hour for this, and day 2 operations I can talk for 90 minutes easily about. Before we go any further, there will be some time for Q&A at the end. However, as a couple of you have spotted already, there is a questions panel in the GoToWebinar panel. If you want to drop your questions in there, I will read them out, and we'll get them answered at the end of the session. So rather than trying to deal with unmuting people and all the rest of it, then we'll deal with that at the end. I have built in a fair amount of time to cover that, so we should be good. So let's talk about vSphere 7. So some of you have probably seen the release videos. Some of you have probably seen the blog posts. And from a unified platform perspective, the really, really interesting stuff for a lot of people is all the stuff around Tanzu. So Tanzu is VMware's umbrella term for essentially all the kind of the modern application services. So the Tanzu Kubernetes grid, previously known as Project Pacific. We've got Tanzu Mission Control, which is it's a cloud-based software as a service offering to allow you to manage Kubernetes running anywhere, whether that be on premises, whether that be in public clouds or anywhere else. Then we've got a bunch of hybrid infrastructure services. So we've got the vSphere pod service, which is the thing that makes the magic happen. It means it allows you to run those spherelets on bare ESXi, so you don't need to worry about installing an operating system and then installing Kubernetes, and all that magic happens in the vSphere pod service. We've got the network and the storage service, so the container network interface and the container storage interface. These are really important because if you don't have the networking capabilities and the storage capabilities, then there's not a lot going to happen with your Kubernetes workloads. And then there's the registry service, which has been available for a while. It's called Harbor. That's an open source offering. So you can maintain all of your container images in a trusted repository. You don't have to worry about your developers going out and pulling potentially malicious workloads from public container repositories, because that's a real concern in terms of security there. Talking about developer services. So typically when we talk about developer services, we're talking about infrastructure developer services rather than application developer services. The application developer stuff was the previous slide. So from a infrastructure developer services perspective, there's a whole bunch of new APIs. I'm not even going to begin to try to write them down because there's hundreds and hundreds of just lots and lots and lots of new API calls and some brand new APIs as well. There's some improvements to Developer Center. So the key ones here are, vRealize Orchestrator can handle JavaScript. It can now also handle PowerShell, so PowerCLI, Python, and Go. So Go is obviously a new one because of the Kubernetes side of things, and Python it seems to be the language of choice for those who are kind of doing their infrastructure management at scale. It's certainly one of my favorite ones. So we've got PowerCLI for vSphere 7 and WCP. WCP is workload control plane, which was the internal terminology used for essentially how all the Kubernetes stuff on vSphere is managed. Moving on, intrinsic security. So security is super important, especially when you're looking at when you're looking at things like containers where there could be a feeling that it's a little bit Wild West. But some of the key things that I really like in here, certificate management improvements. So it's long been accepted that managing certificates on vSphere has been a nightmare. So a lot of conversations that I've had in the past 2 or 3 years have been based around the fact that someone's tried to deploy custom certificates and they end up in a real mess, especially if you're doing things like setting VMCA up as a subordinate certificate authority. I generally recommend customers do not do that. There's vSphere Trust Authority for ESXi host attestation. So this is all about having known good configuration. So essentially you're doing attestation from a small subset of hosts that will then attest for all the rest of them. So there's going to be a lot more coming down the line in the next year or so, I would imagine, for vSphere Trust Authority, and it's going to be a really hot topic. I imagine probably in the Update 1 release. There's also identity federation. So from an identity federation perspective, this is all about moving the method of logging into vCenter. So at present, you have single sign-on, you've got vSphere.local, and essentially vSphere is its own identity provider. Now, if you've got to deal with audit requirements and things like that, then that means that your vCenter is now in scope of that audit. So what they're looking at now is there's the capability to use Active Directory Federation services, so OAuth to ADFS. So you can now log into vCenter using ADFS. Coming further down the line, there will be other identity providers, so things like Ping and Okta, all of that stuff will be coming down the line. From a lifecycle management perspective, and this was one of the things I was responsible for, so I'm super chuffed to see this this coming out of the woodwork. So we've got vCenter server profiles, which I think is super cool. Essentially, what we've got here is that VMware have some customers and they run many vCenter servers. But there's no way to kind of say, okay, well, we want to capture a golden configuration of how we want every single one of our vCenter servers to be built. So when you're deploying more vCenter servers, you've got to build scripts to configure them all. vCenter server profiles it deals with this problem. So you export the config to a JSON document, you make configuration changes within that JSON document that you need, you import it or you use it when you're deploying your next vCenter server. It's kind of like, if you think of it like host profiles, but for vCenter, and it's using JSON, so it's not using some horrific XML or anything like that. There's vSphere Lifecycle Manager. So from the perspective of ESXi hosts, at present, you've got Update Manager, you've got host profiles, you've got auto deploy. These are great tools, but some of them haven't been developed particularly over the last few years, and none of them really talk to each other very well, and also the APIs are not great. So I'm so pleased to see this move come from VMware. So just kind of elaborating on Lifecycle Manager, this gives you the capability, once you've got everything upgraded to vSphere 7, you can manage your cluster state. So the cluster state will be the version of ESXi, any extra drivers that you need, the firmware on the hardware. So this is all of this goes beyond the previously existing configuration management for HBAs. We're talking about the BIOS for your server system boards. It's the drivers and everything, and making sure that they're all going to be compatible with the next release that you're dealing with. And finally, there's vCenter Update Planner, which deals with it looks at which VMware product you've got installed, and it will alert you when there's an update and what the impact of running that update will be on the rest of your environment. So I think this is all super cool. Excuse me. And then in core vSphere, we've got some DRS improvements. So DRS is now, it now looks at the configuration and the performance at a virtual machine level rather than at the cluster level. So it's more focused on the workloads. We've got some optimizations to vMotion, especially when you're looking at things like 25 gig, 40 gig, 50 gig Ethernet cards. We've got support for new CPUs. So, as is always the case, it takes a long time for this support to come through. And then we've got a new version of VM compatibility. So VM compatibility version 17, which comes with support for the virtual precision time protocol, virtual secure guard extensions. So that's the Intel Secure Enclave product. And then also the virtual watchdog. There's loads of information out there already, and I'm sure a bunch of you have seen some of these. But if you go to blogs.vmware.com/vSphere, there's loads more information that I've really got time to talk about in this session. So let's crack on. So in terms of planning, I spent ages looking for a meme to cover planning, and I think my favorite cartoon when I was a child was Wile E. Coyote, so the Roadrunner, and this one won out essentially. And so planning is super important, because if you do your planning correctly, you can spend 80% of your time doing the planning, and then maybe 20% of that time actually executing, because you should have, the first time you execute that upgrade, it should be successful. If you find that you're spending maybe 20% of your time planning and 80% executing, it's probably because you're having to back out, do reinstalls, raise support tickets, all the rest of it. So please do your planning up front. The term failing to plan is planning to fail comes to mind, and that's been attributed to a bunch of people. So who was the first one? Benjamin Franklin apparently coined that phrase. Also, apparently Alan Lakin coined that phrase. But the first person I heard it from was my mum. So my mum has been great at keeping me humble, and she constantly criticizes me all my life. So yeah, my mum, I like to I'd like to attribute that onto my mum. In terms of documentation then, so vSphere Central has had a whole new lick of paint attached to it, and all of the stuff that you really need to plan your vSphere upgrade is right there in that vSphere upgrade channel. But we should really look at what we've got here. So we've got release notes, we've got the vSphere upgrade documentation. Please read these things because there's super important information in there. Like you may be running a specific build where there's a known issue. Before you even begin the upgrade process, please read these things because it's going to save you time later on. The interoperability matrices, and I've mentioned these already, but this is the VMware documentation that tells you all about the versions of the software that you've got installed and which versions of which products are going to work together. And also they cover the upgrade order and which products are allowed to work together in the upgrade process. We've got third-party compatibility checks. So check your backup software, for example. I know there's going to be a whole bunch of people on this call that, yeah, as soon as the bits are available, they're going to be deploying them in the lab, and then the first thing that's going to happen is their backup product is going to throw a wobbler. So yeah, please check these things before you do the upgrade, because the backup vendors, I'm not picking on backup vendors, but that's only because backup is super important. But please make sure you cover all of these things. If you have any products that plug into vSphere, you need to make sure that they're going to work when you do the upgrade. The hardware compatibility list, I'll come to that shortly. The product documentation, all of this stuff is really, really important. Make sure that you know what you're doing before you even download those bits, never mind mount that ISO file. And finally, yeah, please look at vSphere Central. In my time at VMware, I built a whole bunch of stuff that lives there. The team that will look after that, they really, really work their backsides off. So please use it. Please make people aware of it as well. Oh, hopefully nobody on this call has ever seen one of these. But I've seen lots and lots and lots over my years. The main reason that we see purple screen of deaths is because of bad drivers, bad firmware, or combinations of them. It's really important that you check the VMware compatibility guide. So the HCL, it's got a wealth of information there, and I would expect over the coming days we will see some updates there to cover vSphere 7 as well. The pertinent information, especially when you're looking at I/O devices, is this column over on the right-hand side. So the vid, the did, the svid, and the max sid. Trips off the tongue, right? So you need to go to all of your servers and you need to get that information. And then you need to check, that you're running the right firmware, you're running the right drivers, and then you need to check them on the, you need to check them against the HCL and make sure they're all going to work with the release you're going to. So that sounds like a lot of work, really. Yeah, so imagine if it could be easier. So obviously I'm here on behalf of Runecast, so let's have a quick look at what we've got here. So let's just zoom in there. So Runecast Analyzer, in case people aren't aware, we've got this capability in here for hardware compatibility, and we can check an upstream release of ESXi as well. So there are other tools out there that you can run scripts and things like that, but I think the fact that I can see everything in the environment that quickly, which objects we're going to have problems with. So this HBA isn't supported on the HCL. So yeah, that quickly we can get the information for many vCenters, and yeah, I think that's worth its weight in gold. But what if your hardware is not compatible? So for example, here, if your virtualization environment is actually just a bunch of potatoes with crocodile clips and wires going between them, I think you're going to struggle to get ESXi 7 running on those, to be honest. But if your hardware is not going to support going to vCenter 7, and this could be HBAs, it could be that your vendor has not chosen to accredit it for the next version, or it could be that the CPU that you've got in your servers is too old. So the slightly good news is that you can still go to the newer version of vCenter Server, because vCenter Server supports N-2 versions of ESXi. So if you go to vCenter 7, you can carry on running hardware that's running at ESXi 6.5 and ESXi 6.7. Those releases are both supported until November next year. So that gives you some time to raise a business case, ask for some money so that you can actually go through that upgrade process for you. Worth knowing though is, if you want to go to the newest version of vSAN, you need to be running the latest version of ESXi as well. So vSAN, if you need new CPU compatibility, if you want the new VM compatibility, so if you want VM compatibility version 17, you need to be running ESXi 7. How are we doing on time? Oh, blimey. So I quite like this image. Karen in the bottom right is my favorite. For me, it's really important that before you begin the upgrade process, the state that your environment is in a healthy state. So we've got a few tools. I've got a few tools listed here. Some are free, some cost money. You can use these to establish whether your environment is in a sane state. And so we can do that. So there's the free open source vCheck. There's millions of plugins for that. You can download it, you can use it for free, and you can find out what the state of your environment is in. It's really good at finding those, those 4-year-old snapshots that you definitely think you haven't got, but you wonder why that SQL Server runs so slowly. There's RV Tools, which also gives you a similar kind of capabilities, has some really cool export capabilities as well. That requires Windows. There's the VMware Health Check. So if you work for a partner or you are working with a partner, the partner can download the VMware Health Analyzer. They can run a report there. That is an incredibly comprehensive check. You will get a lot of information out of that, and some of it may or may not be of use to you. You can use Runecast Analyzer. It's, another thing that Runecast Analyzer is designed to do is to help you see the state of your environment. Things to bear in mind. Before we even start these upgrades, we're going to want to take a file-based backup for the VCSA. If you've got a vCenter on Windows, you're going to want to take an image-based backup and also a separate database backup. You don't need to take an ESXi firmware backup, but it's super simple to do with PowerCLI. And I would strongly recommend that, unless you're using something like Host Profiles, it's a really easy way to go belt and braces and make sure that you can recover very quickly. So just showing you some of the screens in Runecast Analyzer here. We won't spend too long on this, but here we can see we scan against all of the knowledge base articles online. So there's thousands of these things, right? So we scan against those, and we will warn you when there are situations in your environment. So in this situation, we've got an ESXi host that fails with a purple screen of death after upgrading to 6.5. So we enumerate all of this information. We show you which objects are affected. So we've got 3 ESXi hosts here that are going to be affected, so that you can take the relevant action. And that might be that you need to upgrade and install a new patch. It may be that you need to set some kind of advanced configuration parameters. It may be that you need to roll an upgrade back. But you really want to know before you do these upgrades, that you're going to hit on these issues. One other thing that we do is we monitor the logs on your ESXi hosts. So in this case, we have got something, oh, right, yeah, okay. So an ESXi 6 host becomes disconnected from vCenter server. So here we've got some logs coming from SSHD. And again, we're showing the ESXi hosts that are affected by this. And if your hosts become disconnected, especially if you're partway through an upgrade, then you're going to have a bad time. And finally, again, we have an all issues view here, so we can see the state of your environment over time, and we can see where we're remediating things. Ideally, before you do that upgrade, over on the right-hand side, which is where we are today, that obviously in this screenshot is 26th of November 2018, but ideally by that point, that graph is going to be much lower than it is there. So we've got what 300-ish issues in the environment. We definitely want to get rid of those. So moving on to interoperability. So I did mention this a little earlier, but here on the left-hand side, we're showing the compatibility between different versions of VMware NSXV and vCenter Server. So we need to be very, very conscious before we do the upgrade that whatever we're upgrading to is going to be compatible with everything else there. So if we've got if we've got NSX in the environment, or if we've got any other product, if you've got SRM, if you've got vSAN, if you've got vRealize Operations, vRealize Automation, Orchestrator, all of these things, you're going to want to check this before you start your upgrade. On the right-hand side there, we show the upgrade path. So there are some upgrades that are supported, some upgrades are not supported. So here we can see We've got a whole bunch of green ticks, and that's good. However, if you look closely, we've also got some little grey blobs with an eye on it. And if you mouse over those eyes, it will tell you very specific things. So it may be that if you're going there from a specific build of 6.5, maybe there's a known issue, which means that you can't actually go there, or it's a back in time upgrade. So you're going from there were points with 6.5 code where you couldn't upgrade to the latest version of 6.7 code until a newer patch came out. So yeah, we've got all of those things to cover. Definitely check all of this for all of the products that you've got installed. Pretty importantly, snapshots are not backups. So a handy little nugget actually, if you are doing an upgrade and you have your vCenter server is an appliance, if you take a snapshot of that appliance before you do the upgrade, it's going to double the amount of disk space that is deployed for the appliance when the new appliance is deployed, because the logic in the upgrade process checks to see the disk space that's allocated, and it sees the snapshot as well. So this is not great, because once you've actually completed that upgrade, it's really difficult to be able to resize those volumes without, well, it's just not a situation you want to get in. There are ways and means around it, and if you call support, they will guide you through doing that. But ideally, you should have a file-based backup. Take that file-based backup and you're all good to go. So if anything goes wrong, you deploy a brand new appliance, you point it at that backup, and it will pull all of the database in exactly the same way as the upgrade process does. So that's kind of all of the really dull, yes, you need to look at all of these things before we get started. So let's have a look at the upgrade process. So if you're going to upgrade to 6.5 or 6.7, that process looks like this. So you must upgrade all PSCs. You must upgrade, once you've done all your PSCs, so that's all PSCs in a single sign-on domain. If you have PSCs in the single sign-on domain that are maybe in your DR site, you must still upgrade those before you move on to the vCenter servers. So you can't just upgrade the DR site and then a week later do the production site. It's got to be done PSCs first. Once we've done all the vCenter servers, we move on, we do ESXi, and then the rest of it is kind of, you don't need to do this, but there are benefits to doing so. So upgrade VMware tools, upgrade VM compatibility. If you're going to upgrade VM compatibility, please make sure you've upgraded tools first. I've definitely seen situations where customers have upgraded VM compatibility and they're using para-virtualized drivers, and they do the upgrade and all of a sudden they've got no network because there's no driver for the network card. So yeah, definitely look into that before you do those. There's some improvements there for storage. So VMFS6 and I think vSAN 20 million or whatever version vSAN's on. So there's a new vSAN on disk format. So again, you get better performance. There's some extra features for VMFS. VMFS6, the killer feature is the automatic reclamation of thin provision space. Finally, there's the vSphere distributed switch, and you know there's a new version of the vSphere distributed switch, which is 6.6. That came in 6.7. There's a story behind that. It's not very interesting, so I won't bore you. But there's benefits to upgrading those as well. The big one for going to 6.6 is the Mac learning capability in the distributed switch. So you no longer need to run with promiscuous mode enabled if you wanted to do nested virtualization. That's a major win there. Excuse me. If you're going to vSphere 7, it's a little bit simpler. So when we do the upgrade process, there's no PSCs because there's no external PSC with vSphere 7. If you have a deployment with external PSCs, it's automatically going to converge. So if you have a vCenter server and an external PSC, when you do the upgrade, the vCenter server appliance that you end up with will have a PSC embedded into it. And then you later need to go and clear up the old PSCs. You then upgrade ESXi, VMware tools, all the rest of it is the same. So yeah, there we go. So it's exactly the same, apart from there's no external PSCs. So I've got a scribble that I did on a whiteboard earlier, and I meant to take this slide out, so I apologize to you all for having to see this, but let's have a laugh. So here we've got two sites, site A and site B. And so here on PSC1, VC1. VC1 is pointing to PSC1, which is replicating to PSC2, which has VC2 pointing at PSC2. There's then 3 ESXi hosts in a cluster. The PSCs are running vSphere 6.5. The vCenters are running 6.5. The ESXi hosts are running 6.0. And I think there's a virtual machine in there as well, but I forgot to draw it. So that's the kind of starting state. And how are we doing? Awesome, we've got loads of time. So let's have a look at the video I recorded. So here, this is a Windows environment. So we've got PSC running Windows. The first job we need to do is we need to go to the VCSA installation media, go to the migration assistant, and launch the migration assistant. If you don't do this, you will fail at the first hurdle. This is required on all virtual machines, all of the infrastructure that is running on Windows. So if you've got an external update manager server, you need to run this on there as well. It says waiting for migration to start. Do not close this console. So we'll now just go to my jump box where I'm managing this from, and we'll launch the UI installer. I was going to talk about the CLI installer, but I didn't have time, unfortunately. So we'll launch this installer. And we've got the option to install, upgrade, or migrate. Because we're replatforming from Windows, we're going to do the migrate. And again, we're using the 6.7 Update 3 installer for this, but it would be the same for 7. So we tell it where the source Windows server is, where we're running the migration assistant. Don't run this from the machine that you're about to migrate from, because it gets shut down. We're going to validate that SHA-1 thumbprint is correct, and then we get a warning saying the external PSC is deprecated, because it is. We're then going to tell it where to deploy our new appliance. So we're going to deploy a brand new appliance, which will take the identity of the source Windows server. So this includes any certificates that are installed on the source PSC. So we're just going to put this, these are the credentials for where I'm deploying to. So this is in my lab. We're going to deploy it into that data center. I'm going to deploy it into the management cluster because that's where I've got ESXi hosts. We'll give it a name. So this is just a friendly name. It doesn't necessarily need to map to the fully qualified domain name of the host that you're deploying. So I just call this PSC1-appliance. We're going to give it a root password. It's got to be reasonably secure. I'm not going to tell you what my super secret password is, but it's probably reasonably easy to guess. So I'm going to use thin disk mode because, again, this is a small lab environment and I need all that disk space for other things. Folding at home appliances at the moment. Make sure I select the correct network. If you don't select the correct network, you'll get through phase 1 and then it will basically stop. And then you've got to fix the network, connect to it, and you connect on the VAMI, and then you can kick off phase 2 again. So this is all good for that network. Let's click finish. And this bit, thankfully, should be a little bit faster than in real life. So we're just going to deploy this appliance. And then it's going to install some RPMs onto that PSC appliance. There we go, wait for several minutes. Yep, okay, so because we fixed the network correctly, this goes on automatically to phase 2. And at phase 2, this then connects back to the source appliance. It pulls the configuration out of there. It shuts down the source appliance. You can join the CEIP if you want to. Obviously, make sure you read the full license agreement before you do any of these things, because everybody does that, right? Make sure you confirm that you have taken a backup of that source PSC, and obviously make sure that you have taken that backup as well. Just a warning that the source PSC will be closed down at the end of this. So migration is being initiated. Oh, well, we've got some great questions coming in already. And again, this is happening much, much quicker than it would in real life. Because we only had an hour to cover this, and this video took, I think, an hour and 25 minutes to record in real time. So we're just doing the Active Directory side of things. We're going to set up the target PSC, start the services, and then at this point, it's going to pull in the data that it's copied. So it backs up the data from the source PSC, stores it locally, and then it imports it after it's shut it down. That's an important warning there. TLS 1.0 and 1.1 is disabled on 6.7 Update 3. So if you have any products that are using TLS 1 or TLS 1.1, you need to get off there. And that's it. That's that done. Oh no, wait. So just to prove that I did it for all the others, this is super speeded up. This honestly definitely is not as fast as it happens. But yeah, so I've done it for the other the other PSC and the two vCenter servers. This should be the last vCenter server. Content library. There's not a lot in this in here, but that's it. So we're now logged in. Right, we'll not make you watch that again. So that's that's two PSCs and two vCenter servers in linked mode across two separate sites, migrated to the vCenter server appliance. So that's actually the hardest bit of work. That is the thing that causes almost everything. If anyone's going to run into problems, they're going to run into problems with vCenter. So let's have a look at upgrading ESXi hosts. So again, we can see here, this one is running ESXi 6. So we're going to use Update Manager because Update Manager is the easiest way to do this. So we've already imported the ESXi 6.7 Update 3 image. If we didn't, this is where we would import it, but we already have it, so let's just cancel that. So we're going to create a new baseline. We're going to give that baseline a useful name, something like upgrade to 6.7 U3. It does exactly what it says on the tin. And then finish. Okay, so we've now got the baseline created. We need to apply that baseline to an object. So we're going to go select this vSAN cluster, and we're going to apply this baseline here. So we're going to attach this baseline, upgrade to 6.7 U3, and then we're going to check for compliance against that. So we just need to scroll up a little bit. There we go. And this compliance check we can see happening down in the bottom in the recent tasks. So we can now see that our environment is not compliant with that upgrade to 6.7 U3 baseline. So let's remediate that. Obviously, fully read that and use a license agreement. Don't just tick the box, because there's something in there that tells you what you need to do with your firstborn. And so we've now kicked off this the remediation. So we can see that ESXi03 has gone into maintenance mode. And just in case you don't believe me, that was the console of that machine. So that's just been shut down, and we've got the 6.7 on there already. So it's just going to go through the upgrade process now. So the binaries are on there. It already says it's running the newer version, but it needs to cache some files from Update Manager. And obviously I'm running this all on nested virtualization. So if you want to test this, if you're about to do this upgrade, it's definitely worth giving it a shot with nested virtualization, just in case there's anything that you're not massively comfortable with. So we can see here, this is now just booting up again. I'm not going to make you watch all three of these upgrade, because again, there's no fun to be had in that. Right, and then we should see, there we go, it's back in maintenance mode, and we're all good really. So that one's still running 6.0, but that's because that's where we just started. Okay, let's crack on. So that's vCenter server, the platform services controllers, and your ESXi hosts. The next thing, as I said, this is not mandatory, and I should caveat, VM compatibility, I would generally only recommend upgrading this in the event that you need some of the new features. So if you're moving to vSphere 7, and you were looking at things like the vWatchguard process and virtual PTP for some of your workloads, or virtual SGX, and then you're going to need virtual VM compatibility version 17. If you don't, then generally, so long as everything's at version 9, version 9 is the version that comes with the CPU microcode fixes for Spectre, Meltdown, L1TF, all of those ones. So you're going to want to be at 9 as a bare minimum. If you have an appliance that is lower than version 9, get in touch with the vendor and say, can you provide me with a newer version of the appliance, because I have concerns around security. Once you get to version 11, there's no performance increase whatsoever unless you need the extra configuration maximums and the extra services. So there's a whole bunch of things. So if you needed support for Microsoft virtualization-based security, then you need to go up some levels. If you need VM encryption, you need to go up some levels. But otherwise, 11 is absolutely fine if that does everything that you need. So in terms of upgrading VMware tools, we've all seen the warnings pop up saying VM tools is out of date in your virtual machine. I can talk for an hour about VMware tools upgrades, but we don't have time for that. So I just wanted to call out here, you've got two options if you're doing the upgrade through here. If you do the automatic upgrade, be aware of the bit that I've highlighted there. the guest OS will be automatically rebooted if it needs to. So if you select the automatic upgrade process, it's gonna cause a reboot of that virtual machine, probably. There are some advanced options, so you can put some switches into that advanced options box. There's a knowledge base article out there that will cover that for you. VM compatibility. So VM compatibility requires a power operation on that virtual machine, and I think it was either 6.7 update 2 or I think it was actually update 3. There was some power CLI so that you could tell the virtual machine the next time it rebooted that it should actually do a full power cycle. So that's kind of helpful if you're doing things that require CPU microcode fixes in the virtual machine, for example. But yeah, otherwise you can specify on a cluster level the default VM compatibility level. So anyone who creates any more virtual machines will be at that level by default. That can be overridden. So if you set it to be version 11, there's nothing to stop one of your other admins from going in there and saying, actually, I want it to be version 14 or version 17 or whatever. But it sets a default there. And then you schedule the VM compatibility. So you right click on the virtual machine. So here we've got a Windows XP professional box. Nobody's got any of those in their environments anymore, right? And we want to upgrade it to be version 14, so 6.7 update 2 and later. This new box I'm a big fan of. Only upgrade after a normal guest OS shutdown, because I've seen when people have checked the box to say gone through this process, and then the virtual machine crashes. And then the upgrade happens and the virtual machine's in a bit of a mess and you end up having to restore a backup. So this only does the upgrade after the virtual machine has been cleanly shut down. So you click OK on that. The next time that virtual machine reboots, it will be shut down, the hardware will be upgraded and it'll be powered up again. It will take exactly as long as a reboot. Don't worry about that. Upgrading storage. So I did mention there's a new version of VMFS, VMFS 6. So let's have a look at this. Anyone who's been working with vSphere as long as I have probably remembers going from VMFS 3 to VMFS 5 and how basically all you had to do was right click on that data store and upgrade to VMFS 5. Unfortunately, well, or otherwise, VMFS 6 is an entirely new file system. It's not an upgrade to the existing file system. So, there's a whole bunch of different metadata, different services that back that. So unfortunately, this isn't possible. What you need to do, there we go, no in-place upgrade. What you need to do is create a brand new VMFS 6 data store. And then you need to vMotion your workloads across, and then you kill off the old VMFS 5 data store and reclaim that for your storage. Now, there are some vendors out there, I'm not going to name names, but specifically Hyperconverged, that provide all of your storage as a single VMFS data store. And I got asked this question a lot of times, how do we deal with that in this situation? The only answer I could give you there is you should speak to your storage vendor if that's the case, or your Hyperconverged infrastructure vendor. They should be able to validate that for you. There's also a new version of vSAN. So here we see this lab, because it was all running ESXi 6, they were running vSAN 3.0. So there's a new version there for vSphere 7. Again, you come in here, you run the pre-check, and then you click the upgrade button. I didn't make a video of this because it takes forever, and it makes for a really dull video. Even with a fairly tiny lab, because I'm doing nested virtualization, it's not the fastest. But basically, how this works is it pulls one disk out of a disk group at a time. It formats it, it reinserts it, and it's a rolling upgrade. So once it starts, you cannot stop it. You just have to let it run through. And I've seen some environments where they've got large clusters, and especially when they're running hybrid clusters, this could take days. So that's to bear in mind. Then once this is completed, it will run another check, and it will tell you that everything's healthy. Networking wise, so I did mention that the vSphere distributed switch, there's new versions in 6.5 and 6.7. They're called vSphere distributed switch version 6.5 and 6.6. This is really simple to upgrade. So there is a knowledge base article out there that if you're going to upgrade to 6.6, and you've got some specific niche corner cases, you could come across issues. So please have a look for those knowledge base articles and read them before the upgrades. But most importantly, take a backup first, because there is no rollback on a VDS upgrade. Once you click upgrade, it's going to run through, and your method of restoring the previous version is basically restore the backup. So create a new VDS and install the config on there. But it takes a few seconds to do that. I've seen, in worst case scenario, I've seen that take 30 seconds. But again, this is a control plane upgrade, so your data plane shouldn't be impacted on that, apart from in specific use cases. And on that note, your upgrade is complete and you get some confetti. So everyone's a winner. We have 14 minutes to go, which is good because I've got another 122 slides to get through. So let's just talk a little bit about convergence. Let me just dig out the whiteboard. Right, where are we? So let's staff. Which one is me? Is it going to be this one? That's okay. That. Oh, looks like it's me. So hopefully, all being well, we should now see a whiteboard. Obviously, none of you can speak up if that's not the case, but everything looks good to me, so I'm just going to crack on with it. So in this situation, I'm just going to show you quickly how convergence works. So yeah, okay, we're good on that. So let's say, no, that's not the right color. Let's go with one that's actually going to work. There we go. Okay, so what I've got here is a platform services controller. You can tell it's a platform services controller because it's got a P in it. That is a P, I promise. Right, so what we've got there is that, and then we've got 2 vCenter servers. And we know this because, well, that's not a V. Let's try that one again. So we've got 2 vCenter servers. So both of them at present are using that platform services controller for authentication. So what we're going to do is we've got a jump box here. So I'm just going to signify this as a jump box by coloring all in because I really love coloring in, and I'm not going to go outside the lines. There we go. Best whiteboard ever. So from here, we're going to mount the installation media for the vCenter server appliance, and from the command line, or from, you know, if you've upgraded to 6.7 update 3, there's a user interface for this as well. We're going to connect, and into here we're going to deploy the PSC binaries. So the PSC binaries are exactly as they sound. It's just a bunch of processes, some extra logging and things that happen, and they get deployed into that vCenter server. From there, let's select a different color. We're going to set up a replication agreement, and that replication agreement is going to talk to this PSC here. And it's bidirectional replication. Generally, there's not a lot of information to pull down, so the replication should be synchronized pretty quickly. But once we have this replication done, then we're good. However, what we want to do is, let's go back to black. We're going to also, from our jump box, we're going to connect to this vCenter server here, this appliance. We're going to deploy the same binaries. And then what we're going to do is we're going to set up a second replication agreement. And this replication agreement is going to go between the 2 vCenter server appliances. And once that's in sync, then what we've got is all of these here. They're now in a replication agreement, and this might be our vSphere.local domain, single sign-on domain. It could be any SSO domain at all. So our final job, actually not quite our final job, our second from final job is that we need to figure out all of the solutions that we've got in the environment that are talking to this baby. So anything that is registered against that PSC as a solution. So some things like, if you've got NSX deployed, NSX Manager, that's registered against a PSC for authentication. So you're going to want to make sure you repoint that to one of these two embedded PSCs. It doesn't really matter which, because in the event that something goes wrong with one of them, you can just repoint it to the other. But yeah, so you need to do that, because the last job that we've got for this environment is we're just going to take this PSC and we're going to get rid of it. So that gets removed from the entire environment. So it's not just that it's turned off, it's that it's removed from all replication agreements within the single sign-on domain. And once that happens, it's not just a case of powering it back up. If you wanted to get that back, you would need to deploy a new PSC, set up replication agreements between these or these, and yeah, it's going to be a mess to deal with. So that's pretty much that's convergence. So that's if you're going from 6.0 to 6.5 or 6.7, or specifically to 6.7 really. If you go, unless you're going to 6.5 update 2D or higher. That's what's going to happen if you want to get from an external platform services controller model to an embedded PSC model. Hopefully that makes sense. The good news is if you're going to vCenter 7, that happens automatically. You don't need to do anything in order to get that to work. So hopefully that made sense. And we will just switch this back to, go on, there we go. So that should be the end of that one then. So what else have we got? So I've got some time for some Q&A, so that's great. We've got 8 minutes left. Before I do that, I'm just going to do our quick sales pitch. So the best business benefits of Runecast Analyzer, we're looking there to save you time, to reduce outages, to improve security, to reduce your cost, to minimize risk. We continue, yada, yada, yada. If you're interested in any of those things, go to runecast.com. You can download a 14-day trial. That trial is just an OVA appliance. You deploy it into your environment. You point it at vCenter, NSX Manager, Horizon Connection Servers, or if you're using it, and if you're using AWS native services, you can point it to your AWS account, and we'll pull back all of that information, security compliance, and all the rest of it. And you know that should get you going. If you want any more information, email us at innovate@runecast.com, and we'll be happy to arrange a demo for you. I tried to make this as unpitchy as possible, but you know we've got to cover these things. So let's move on to the questions. We've got 7 minutes left. So oh, hi Monica. So Monica came to the vSphere Roadshow in Warsaw a few months ago. Hope you're doing well, Monica. That's great to hear from you. Is there any tool integrated or not, or third vendor to evaluate the environment to indicate if there will be some incompatibility problems before proceeding with the upgrade? So from a Runecast perspective, we do the we do the HCL checks for you, so you can run that check and see if we're going to see if the hardware is going to be compatible. In terms of software compatibility, you're very much at present. You're very much on your own, so you need to check the third-party products. You need to check the interoperability matrices. There is, once you get to vSphere 7, there is the vCenter Update Planner, which will help you with future upgrades for vSphere products that are registered against vCenter. So things like vRealize automation, things like actually, VRA is not a great example because it's the other way around. But things like NSX Manager, things like vRealize operations, anything that installs itself as a plugin, you will be able to see through Update Manager. So hopefully that answers your question, Dennis. Ken Melbourne there. We've all seen the purple screen. Yeah, everyone's seen the purple screen of death. If anyone hasn't, count your lucky stars. It probably means that you're going to see one tomorrow. So how is it different from the vSphere assessment tool? So that's a great question there from Samesh. I'm assuming that's with relation to Runecast Analyzer. So the vSphere assessment tool is a product that you can deploy onto a workstation in your environment. You point it at vCenter, and then it gathers a bunch of information and it uploads that into the VMware Analytics Cloud. Once it's in the VMware Analytics Cloud, they do some analysis on it, and they'll tell you things like, whether your hardware is going to be compatible. Now, I'll be 100% honest. I've not looked at the vSphere assessment tool in probably the last 3 or 4 months, so I don't know what's happened since then. The key difference between us and that is, honestly, we've kind of done side-by-side testing on the VMware HCL features that are in vSphere 7 and the analysis that we get from Runecast Analyzer. You get all of the information in one place, and also it's more accurate. There were a number of devices, so things like storage controllers that we found were not detected, even though they're on the HCL, and we can pull the information, we can check it against the HCL, so we can see all of that. The other key difference is Runecast Analyzer does all of this in the appliance in your data center, so it's not sending any data to the cloud at all. So for some folks on this call, that's not going to be a concern. For some folks in some geos, it definitely is. So that's one of the key differentiators there. Could we get a recording and slides from Andre? Yes, I believe the recording will go out in the next couple of days. I'm not putting any pressure on Zuzka from our side, but yeah, it will be going out. So you should get an email, in a couple of days or something like that. I can see her tapping away in Slack. She says yes, big smiley face. So you should receive that. Another one from Samish. How much time does the Runecast tool take to generate this information after deployment? So it depends on the size of your environment, because we've got to pull that information. So for example, we have one customer who they run something just north of 10,000 ESXi hosts. They run one Runecast Analyzer appliance, and that manages it. So for them, when the analysis happens, it takes about 10 minutes. If you've got a regular sized environment, if you've got 20, 30, 40 hosts, typically the analysis takes between 2 and 3 minutes. So you can deploy the appliance. It's an OVA. It's just over a gig. So from the point where you start downloading, depends on how fast your internet is. But you can have that downloaded, deployed into your environment, connected to vCenter, and you can have results in 10 minutes. It's super quick. You don't have to wait for maybe 30 days to get actionable data. You get that actionable data right there on day one. Question there from Eric van Villigan. Is the automatic space reclamation now fully supported and working? That is a really good question. I know there is an issue if your block size is greater than 1 meg. That is one for VMware, I'm afraid. The last I heard, that should be fixed in vSphere 7. However, vSphere 7 obviously is not currently available. So check the knowledge bases, and you'll see that. Question there from Peter Muller is VMFS 6 came out with 6.5. No, so as far as I'm aware, there is no update to VMFS 6 in vSphere 7. I just really wanted to cover also the 6.5 and the 6.7 upgrades, because there's a lot of people out there who are still running vSphere 6, and or they might have upgraded to 6.5 or 6.7, but not done the upgrade to the VMFS. So as far as I'm aware, there is no upgrade to VMFS from that. There is a new version of vSAN in vSphere 7, so that's got some extra capabilities, things like data protection services, file services, etc. How we do? We've got 1 and a bit minutes, and I think we've got 2 questions left. So hopefully that helped you, Peter. Thanks for the question. Upgrade versus install new. If you have a simple environment, can you get by with a fresh install? I mean, you could, but why would you? I really don't understand why people would want to do a fresh install every time, because every time you do the upgrade to vCenter, you're deploying a brand new appliance. So you don't have the problem that you would have had with Windows, where you're just basically downloading a new version and you end up with a load of cruft in there, things that you might not necessarily want. So every time you do the upgrade, you're deploying a new appliance. If there's any views in the database or any tables in the database that they don't need to take across, they don't need to take them across. So you should have a nice clean appliance every time. I would strongly recommend the upgrade versus install new. I've yet to come across a good argument that you would do a brand new deployment every single time. It seems a lot more effort. And one last question. What is the upgrade from 5.5 to 7? There is no upgrade path from 5.5 to 7, Theo. It's not directly supported. So you would need to go from 5.5 to 6 or 6.5, and then you need to go from 5.5 to 6.5, and then from 6.5 to 7. That would be your supported upgrade path. So you're going to have to do all your vCenters, then your ESXi hosts, and then all your vCenters and your ESXi hosts again. That is all the questions we've had so far. Oh, no, it's not. That's a thanks from Theo. And Frankie Barragan was advised to install a fresh ESXi versus upgrading the hosts. So Yes. Okay. So I can see how that might be the case with ESXi, especially if you're using the OEM images, because occasionally what we see there is drivers, when you do the upgrade, unless you're doing the upgrade with an ISO file, the drivers may get left behind because the update manager does an in-place upgrade. It doesn't do a replacement of the image. Now, one of the features of vSphere 7 is Lifecycle Manager. So once you get to vSphere 7, every time you do an upgrade of ESXi, you're essentially installing a brand new release. So it's this kind of, it's kind of moving from the imperative deployment model to the declarative model. So we instead of going, okay, we'll install this version and then patch, install some new drivers, patch, upgrade. You just go, okay, well, this is what I've got today. This is the state that I need to be at, and then Lifecycle Manager will take care of all of that. So yes, I can understand that that might be the case right now in terms of ESXi, especially if you're using OEM images. But I probably wouldn't advise messing around too much with that. And finally, vSphere 6.0 is out of support. That's right, Stephen. Thanks for that. I think I covered that earlier. If not, yes, if you're running vSphere 6, it went end of general support back at the beginning of this month. So please consider upgrading. Reach out to, if you need some help, reach out to your partners. Reach out to your, if you've got a VMware technical account manager, those people are all around there. They're designed to help you get off the older versions. And on that note, I'm very sorry I have overrun by 2 minutes, but hopefully that's been useful for you all. I'd like to thank you all for attending, especially everybody who's stuck around right till the bitter end. So thanks very much for that, and goodbye. You should receive the recordings in the next couple of days. Thanks very much, everyone. Bye-bye.